Good morning. It is a beautiful day. Thank you for choosing to spend it with us. I am your host, John Cox, and this is episode number 4 of the Core Keyword Podcast. On today's episode, we're going to be doing a recap of Midwest Conquest, the 68-person grand tournament that the Hogs of War attended in force a couple of weeks back. And then after that, we're going to be doing some list analysis for Branson Brawl. Joining me on the panel today is the editor, Don Plumley, the captain of the Hogs of War, Howard Watts, and your favorite drop pod fanatic, Bryce Watson. So stay tuned. Fellas, how are we doing today?
Good, man.
Yeah, I'm doing lovely.
Fantastic. So, you guys all went to Midwest Conquest up in Independence, Missouri the other day, and sounds like you guys had a fantastic time. Unfortunately, I was not able to make that one as I was in the process of moving, but it sounds like you guys had a blast.
Yeah, it was great.
It's a really good weekend. It was fun to go up there.
I always enjoy when we get to travel as a team.
Especially in Force, I think we were, 9 players at the event?
8 and then down to 7, I think, because we had one drop, right?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Ethan was feeling sick, so he dropped after day 1. But I do want to point out something I'm very proud of for our team. Other than Ethan, who was feeling sick and had to drop on day 1, all of the Hogs who went to Midwest Conquest came home with a winning record.
Yep, 3-2 or better.
Which I was so pumped to see for everybody.
Yeah, and the level of competition from the Kansas City area is not lacking, right? So going home with a 3-2 record, although we kind of hold ourselves to a pretty high standard, I think a lot of people, Ben and Zach, were like pretty ecstatic to have been in the positions they were going into round 5. So.
Oh, especially Zach, because he dropped. I remember he went 0 and he started off the tournament 0-2. He lost his first 2 games, but then flipped it around and won the last 3. Like, super good on him.
I'm glad that you mentioned that because I wanted to call that out too. I was like, way to go, Zach, for just clawing that back on day 2.
Yeah, a lot of times people just throw in the towel at 0-2 and they're like, well, I guess I'll have fun the rest of the weekend, but. We talked about it a little bit while we played Commander Saturday night, and he's like, I'm just going to go and run the gauntlet. Some of his matchups were factions that we played, so we were able to give him some good insight, and after the fact, he told us that, that was beneficial in his rounds and stuff. So that's probably the thing I enjoy the most about going to team tournaments is, one, spending time with each other, going to dinner. Don had picked a fantastic Italian place.
Oh my God! Yes, that was amazing.
And just having the opportunity to kind of chat with each and everybody about their games, how their matchups went, and
the other thing about it that I was, and this one's down more to RNG than anything, but there was only one action of hog on hog self cannibalizing that happened at the whole event.
I was glad for that. It's always nice to travel somewhere and not play the people that you see every week.
That is also true. I'm sorry, Don, that you and I were that one instance of cannibalization.
No, I'm going to thank you, Bryce.
I am glad it was only us.
I'm just going to thank you because you threw me down into the lower bracket for day 2 and gave me the absolute pathway to my 4-1 end of tournament. So I'm okay with it. We're good.
It did lead you to placing higher than me because that
spoilers,
after,
Don.
Going 3-0. Yeah. After going 3-0, I did get sent right into Brett Perkin, who, to come to find out later, when he lived in the continental United States, would regularly compete for top ITC. Didn't find that out until after the tournament was over.
Yeah, but that game was pretty close. I just peeked at the scores and stuff.
Yeah, and I'll talk about it a little bit later when we're going over our matchups.
Yeah, it's always good to see a bunch of the other guys up there too. I do want to take a moment to shout out Ted from the KC area for having that killer run with Necrons. That was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, got the opportunity to run into Ted. For once, finally got the chance to talk to Kyle McCord. He's been on an Unbroken podcast, and he always does some funky stuff with Imperium. So got to run into him. Got to run into Brian Hunter, Bam Bam. So love that guy. Like, just getting the chance to talk to him is always fun. There's a bunch of Flying Monkey guys up there too. So the Newson family, and got to meet Kevin, guy I played in round 3. He was really cool. But again, we get our team to come travel, and then we get good competition from other teams in the Lord Marshall Conference, and like that only makes us better. In addition to like, it's good competition, and those guys are just fantastic to play against.
Oh yeah, all good dudes. All right. Well, let's get started. Let me pull up my notes here, and we'll take a peek. Man, you guys did kill it. So Ward and Don, both of you guys went 4-1, and then Bryce, you went 3-2 as well there, right? Looking solid, guys. Wait, and one of those losses was Don versus Bryce, really?
Yep.
I was my only loss for the weekend was to Bryce. Yeah.
It literally always happens. It's almost unavoidable at
Nice,
this point.
guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Take it away, Ward. Let's go in order of rankings.
So, we read the packet. It's first 4 blocks on like our understanding after kind of reaching out to some of the Kansas City players. Like, you usually get your biggest piece of terrain, blocks first floor. Everything else is just regular obscuring. So, right before the event starts, the TO comes over the loudspeaker and lets us know that, hey, everything's true line of sight, by the way, and you can have that conversation with your opponent. So then they hit pair, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I play an Ultramarine player. I was like, this will be interesting. I was like, obviously not going to have to tell him kind of what my army does because he already knows. And they hadn't checked to see if everybody had registered and everybody was checked in. So they had to repair. So, but then I pull a guy from Minnesota named Trey. He was playing Salamanders, which isn't the best matchup, I don't think, personally. They kind of have the aggressors, which is what I was trying to leverage in my list, so they can fight about as good as I can. And it turns out Melta's pretty good in the Space Marines. So I can't remember if I won the terrain drop, or if I went first or whatever. I can't remember specifically, but it just ended up kind of setting myself up in the middle like we had talked about, and it was a 3 objective mission, and I was like, cool, I'm leveraging the primary. He's got to come around and get in a line of sight, and then I'm just going to let my Desolators do the work. So one kind of goofy thing from this game, I tell him, I'm like, hey, all this stuff can heroically intervene, and my Judicar can heroic 6 and fight last, and it was cool. So he just advances Brayarth Ashmantle like right into the middle of the table to like kind of contest the objective for primary, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll just heroically intervene. And between me using Transhuman, he hit all 7 times with his attacks, wounded all 7 times, and through my Psychic Fortress killed every single one of that 5-man aggressor squad.
Oof. That is
Oh, and didn't kill him, by the way. He didn't die. So that game started off like I was on the back foot pretty hard.
I will say that is not the way that dice should go.
So, but man, I got to tell you, like just Ultramarine secondaries, March through McCrag, that, and I think I took Assassinate because I was like, I mean, I'm gonna push into him with literally everything I have. I just have to weather a turn from, Eradicators and stuff. But because it was true line of sight, he didn't want to get shot first turn. So nothing was in cover, right? So he was only getting the benefit from the indirect fire, and I was just pumping shots into his Eradicators and just like thinning stuff down as best as I could. But I ended up taking that one 98-68. I just won the attrition game. I think the 2 points I dropped was he had 13 points available for Assassinate. But that round went to time, and I was kind of sweating it because at least on that table there wasn't a clock, so we were using a shared round timer. Round 2 goes up while we're sitting at the Mexican restaurant, and I'm playing a guy named Daniel Newland, and I was sitting next to Peyton, and it was a weird Blood Angel list, but I'm like, well, I mean, my list kind of leans into combat power, and his list just does that a little bit better. He had a big 10-man unit of Terminators, all with Thunderhammers, and I'm like, man, if those make combat with my aggressors, if he can get his Sandguard into me, like that's just going to be trouble. But I got lucky. He went first, right? So I had bottom of turn scoring for both March from Crag and Oath of Moment. And we kind of talked about it after the fact. I was like, dude, you should have combat squatted your Terminators, because if you leave them in a 10-man and don't reserve them, I was like, man, that's a free Oath of Moment right there. But anyways, took that game 100 to 137. So at this point, I'm 2-0.
Blood Angels, it's rough. It's rough on the Blood Angels part, right? They've lost so much of their scoring potential since the Arcs of Omen, and they lost specifically the Death Company one. I forget what it was called, but that one just let them play such a strong passive game because they just score a lot of points as they died, which they were going to do anyway.
Yeah, and like I said, the moment that he got first turn, he's like, if I move in front of your army, I just die. So like I don't think that I can even do that. So he was a little bit hesitant. I think that he should have just went full bore right into me, because his hesitancy kind of bought me a little bit of time. But anyways, took that one 100 to X. I can't remember exactly what it was, but then naturally, right, with a little bit extra time after that one, because it was a little bit quicker of a game, I see that like, oh, I've doing quite well. I've dropped 2 points. I'm on the top table against Votan. Well, Ben was sitting next to us, and we were all kind of having a chat, and he goes, man, he's got a lot of beam weapons. You need to look out for that. The terrain was honestly quite a bit different on the top table, because it actually had some legitimately blocked windows.
Yeah, there was that terrain at some of those tables. There was definite disparity on how your game was going to go based on the table you got.
Yeah, for sure. And it was just a weird. It was just weird because to me, I was like, well, I think I have the chance to do something pretty good here, if I can leverage this. So, anyways, March from a Crag was a 12 on turn 1. And Ben was like, dude, all you have to do is just don't lose the attrition game too quickly, and you will outscore him in secondaries, because Votan's game plan is table you, score it at the end of the game. And that I had set up like all of his lay claim objectives, like where he had to be like really, really, really deep in my deployment zone. Or not in my deployment zone, but as close as they can be by rule. So anyways, he, in his first shooting phases, 2 land fortresses, pick up 10 aggressors, because I rolled a 1 on the advance on both units, and I was like, yeah, I'll just conga line these guys right in front of each other, out in the open. And yeah, that was a mistake. But he literally, he took no prisoners, because that was about, I think I gave up like a 12 on it. And I had 20 wounds. I had 5 inner infiltrators and 5 desolators behind a wall, kind of holding on to my ruin, and I had my chaplain live on a single wound after transhumaning for a CP and re-rolling an invulnerable save. So that let me max Oath of Moment, and because he was still alive, I was able to walk on an objective. I'll walk onto his lay claim, since I had the bottom of the turn, and take 5 points off of him, in addition to getting an 8 on primary instead of a 4. So that was a 93-71 is what that was. But Kevin he's a flying monkey. Like, we know that they're good, and losing 360 points of aggressors in one turn was, I was definitely on the back foot and had to claw back from that. But as previously mentioned, we went to a fantastic Italian place. Came back, brought some takeout back to the Airbnb for my wife, and we kind of hung out and chatted about the day, and played a little bit of Commander and hung out, and then it was into Game 4, and I kind of was riding a little bit of a recency high. I was just like, well, I beat Votan before, and I think that this list is something that I can deal with a lot better than 2 Land Fortress. And just made an absolute game-losing mistake. I advanced my infiltrators up that were kind of holding my backfield, so that I could keep them kind of in my, in the back little corner. And I'm like, cool. He's not going to score late claim because I'm just going to advance them out. Going to hold all three of his objectives. So, I mean, I have a huge advantage in the secondary game. Marshall McCragg only ended, I think I got an 8 or a 12. I think I ended up getting a 12, but he just held me back on primary so many turns, and ended up shock tactics was actually fantastic. And Bryce and I were talking about this a little bit before.
Yeah, shock tactics is a really good. Currently, right now, it's a really good Space Marine secondary, and I think. Partly why you don't see it, I think, is on initial inspection, you look at and it's, so you score 4 points if you take an objective that your opponent held at the start of your turn, and you think, all right, well, melee, right? I'm going to go punch whatever's off. But what I've found is the more successful way of doing it, especially on player place where you can kind of guarantee that one objective is really easy to see, is you just fly like a cheap land speeder or some nonsense unit like I know, Ward, you run a lot of eliminators, go tap the objective, and then you just turn the rest of your army, you say, all right, guns, everything off of that point.
Can confirm that does in fact work.
Yeah, so actually that did happen. Don might have a little bit of PTSD from this question, but is there any OBSEC on that point? And it's like a light bulb when your opponent's like, oh, no, there isn't actually. No, that was Death and Zeal. So like he was able to pregame move onto the objective on Death and Zeal, my top left objective. So he's like, cool, it's sticky now. And I'm like, okay. So I just advanced a land speeder onto it behind cover, and then the Desolators killed them. And I was like, cool, that's going to be 4 for shock tactics. And he was like, ooh, I've made a mistake. And the last one was the Eliminators advancing, getting a huge advance roll from Gilliman, and then being like, well, okay, cool. I'm going to shoot at this thing, and I'm going to move back onto this, and that's going to be another 4, and that's going to hold hold primary, and it just ended up just not being enough. I think I had a single aggressor alive at the end. Exactly what Ben said, like I just lost the attrition game, and I was just out of it at that point.
I found that to kind of be the issue in Devotan, right? Is once you get behind on the attrition game, it's real difficult to like claw back up.
Yeah, because AOC, like we kind of forget that was an era of 9th edition for a time, but stuff was just a little bit more durable. But when I advanced up those infiltrators, he was able to then. I misjudged where the player battlefield edge was. I thought it was on Death and Zeal, like the wide, like the short side of the board, not the long side. So he's like, cool, I'm gonna walk in these this 3-man unit or grab behind it. And I was like, oh, you can't do that because that's the player field edge. He's like, nope, it's the other one. So that grav unit just decimates an entire Desolation Marine squad. And then he had used the warp strike thing to drop in the Terminators with the Volkite, and they ended up killing the infiltrators. So like I lost an objective mission thing that I had set up there, and I just needed to wait a turn. And I was a little bit like, oh cool, like he's got his big 6-man bike unit out, like I need to hit it with I need to come out into true line of sight, right, with my one of the Desolation Marines and blow this unit off the table, and I just didn't need to do that. But anyways, I think that one particular turn, there was a couple other of errors, but that turn was, I think I lost the game in that turn, but it was still only a 10-point loss, 73 points, right? So at this point, I got a 98, I got a 100, I got a 93, like I've dropped 5 points, or 9 points before this 70-something point loss. So I was like, well, we'll go to lunch. We'll see what the draw is, and then move from there. And then I get just an absolute gift of Chaos Knights, but not the normal Chaos Knight build. So my Seal of Oath is just gold here. There's not much to talk about in the 5th game. I got the first turn. I redeployed twice. I put literally all my aggressors in a corner, advanced them, killed nearly 2 carnivores in the first turn. I killed a carnivore and brought it down to like whatever, just a couple wounds. move blocked it with a speeder and with eliminators, and then in the next turn killed another 4 baby knights.
So what I'm hearing, Ward, is the future of Marines is good.
Yeah, it turns out when you can. Well, that and his he had a desecrator with Warpborn Stalker, right? So he could deep strike his big knight to kind of keep it off the table. Which I was like, I see what you did there. That's got some good play. And he took the Warlord trait where he has a +1 to charge. So okay, 8-inch rerollable deep strike charge with the CP, obviously, but he ended up making that charge.
Odds.
Yeah, I mean, he ended up making the charge into my 6-man aggressor squad. I spent 2 CP. He didn't kill me, and then he was like, "So explain Silhouette to me one more time," and I did. He goes, "Yeah, so this is basically dead next turn." And I go, "Yeah." And I was like, probably another baby knight or 2. So at that point, he'd have had 3 baby knights left, and that was only turn 2, by the way.
How did that feel? How did that make you feel, Ward, when someone asked you to re-explain how does reroll hits and wounds into this target work again?
Yeah, it's and I told him, I was like, well, I can always spend a CP to +1 to wound a unit. So like these aggressors that are shooting like just a gigantic amount of shots, I was like, you're going to be taking rerolling wounds, probably like 30 or 40 wounds at -1 AP. So that's 17 damage before the Desolation Marines. And he goes, yeah. He said that was pretty bad. And at that point, I had already marched 3 times. I mean, bring it down is I had already maxed it in turn 2. I mean, it's just, like anytime you play Knights or Chaos Knights, it just picks up your 3rd secondary and it's like, oh, okay, cool, you're already done. So between Oath of Moment, March, and Bring It Down, we called it probably just a little bit into turn 3, 100 to. Let me see real quick. It was 100 to 65, and that was 4-1. And I knew I was probably playing for a potential best overall at that point, because Ash and I had spent a ton of time kind of hobbying up some stuff to look pretty good, and had made a really good looking battle board. And I was like, hey, I'm yeah. And Ashlyn said she wasn't very pleased with it, and I'm like, babe, it looked fantastic, but it, and I knew that I was playing for a 4-1 spot, and that my battle points were pretty decent. He goes, hey, I don't know if you knew this or not, but like this is kind of the 3rd place game, and I was like, oh, okay. I was like, well, in the player pack it just said that 1st and 2nd was given out, but I mean 3rd place at a 68 person major is like an accomplishment.
Yeah, that's sick.
Especially with scrub trash tier don't do anything cool Ultramarines. Speaking, of course, from Reddit, of course, not my own opinion.
Oh, listen, every time I see some Space Marine player out there who has not experienced Oath of a Moment complaining about the 10th Ed rules, I just roll over and laughing. It's just, having been on the receiving end of that so many times, I can tell you, Marine players, it's going to be fine. You're going to enjoy it.
But anyways, in a a woe is me, in a cruel twist of fate, they actually did give a 3rd place plaque, which disqualified me from getting best overall.
Suffering from success.
Yeah, word. Gosh, scrub.
Truly is suffering from success.
But it good games. Made a couple mistakes, but definitely learned quite a bit. And 3rd place, like I said, is most certainly a good showing for the team, which is what I was more concerned with.
Yeah, you got it. Like, you certainly did. Like 3rd place, like you did great for our team. Like, we got the LMC points submitted now, and like, man,
it was a
we jumped up high.
Increase.
Oh, I legitimately thought you were trolling. I was like,
No, seriously, straight up. If you go look, like I think in the chat on Discord, they literally went up like
Let me
right
click
as
on
we
the
started
Midwest
recording.
Conquest. Let's go.
Hogs of War are in
go.
number 1 by 80 points right now.
Let's go. Nice. Good job, team. Yeah.
Good job, Peyton.
everybody.
I know he's not here today, but like he is our top scorer right now. He actually edged out Brent's 2 other
Did he
GT
really?
wins.
By like 3
in
points.
case-
Yeah. But
So in case we have, in
Peyton's
case we
number
failed to
one right
mention
now.
it, Peyton did win this event. So our forumed overlord is going to at some point hopefully be recording like a 10-minute snippet talking about his run. Unfortunately, he could not be here this evening because of work. Dang it, work always getting in the way of things. But huge shout out to Peyton and congrats on winning this event with his Gene Steeler Colts. All right, well, let's put Don on the spot here. We're gonna make him do some talking because
Yes.
he took the terrifying buggy.
Yes, I
Wuggles.
wanted to hear what Don had to say.
don't you know they've been nerfed, Don?
It's
But
what
they're
the internet
terrible.
says.
That's what every one of my opponents told me as well.
45-point Tyrannid Warriors, Don.
I know. I didn't play any of those. Turns
Because
out
they're
if you
45 points?
because they're 45 points, and then you got to buy weapons and stuff. Nah, we won't talk about the sad days of Tyranids. We'll talk about the
No,
good
do
stuff.
you want to talk about the price of a Terminator these days?
Nope.
Would that make you feel better?
Sure wouldn't. But you know what is affordable, Bryce? Carnifexes.
What?
Carnifexes.
They
With
certainly
11
are.
11 glorious
Big
attacks
bugs.
at -3 flat 3. When I can give them reroll ones from Tyrants, and I can give them reroll wounds from a stratagem for 1 CP, and they're at strength 7, and they just move 11 inches? Oh, Screamer Killers are glorious. Alright, so a little bit about this event. Starting off, I took all big bugs, all monsters. There was 5 models in my list. No, well, 7 with the 3 lictors, right? In my list that aren't T7 or 8. My first matchup was with Space Wolves, Melta Rats. Pretty bad matchup for my particular army construction, and that an overwhelming amount of Meltas seems bad. I lost.
It seems bad.
It did seem bad, and it felt bad.
Especially when they don't have to pay any points for them. They
Yeah.
just kind of get to take them.
I just get to do it. It's fine though. So the Hive Mind lost 2 Hive Tyrants, all the Tyrant Guard, and a Carnifex on round 1 to Meltas because Space Wolves moved out very aggressively as they're wont to do. The Screamer Killers and the Mouseceptor just did work though. Like the 3 of those cats, they grabbed some snow shovels and they dug the whole army out and just continued to score points, right? Into an infantry heavy list, 130 wounds on the table in infantry. So I managed to pull 14. Yeah, I pulled 14 on no prisoners. Maxed Warp Ritual arbitrarily because no psychers.
You better model one of those with a snow shovel.
I'm gonna have to. The Mouseceptor needs a new arm, so he'll get one. But yeah, they just did work. I lost a lot of my stuff on my top of turn 2, but on the bottom of turn 2, I picked up about 70% of the Space Wolf army with what was left. And so that pretty well decided
you've done that to me before. We've done some practice games, and you've done that to me before where you kind of forget after getting nerfed 3 times, Tyranids still kill Marines real good.
Yeah, Tyranids slap. So we pulled that game out real narrowly. I think it was 88 to like 82 or something like that. Real tight game.
Ooh.
And then I go into round
that was a
2
sweaty one.
into double Dorn, triple Lehman Russ guard with Kazarkin bomb and some other fun little toys. Player place was really a godsend for me in this event, and that I could set up my playground, right?
Who got first drop on this match?
I did.
Hey, love to hear it.
Yeah, it definitely
yeah,
was.
that would have been
I was able to
beneficial
set
for
up in
sure.
such a way that the only thing that was really exposed was my Tyrant Guard. Granted, Sean moved up real aggressive. He was a super fun opponent. Played a strong game. He just went all in. And, I mean, he said it right from the beginning. He goes, "Well, I'm just gonna dive in, and if I kill everything, then I win." And I go, "Yeah, sounds right."
Sorry, is he the one who won? Did he win Best Opponent?
He did.
Is this,
yeah.
It's the one that Eli played as well. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
he was a delight to be around that whole weekend.
Yeah, he was real fun.
Yeah, he actually talked to us at length after round 2 as we were sitting all there talking about our
No,
round
he
3
was
opponents.
real fun. But yeah, he pushed up real aggressive. Wasn't quite able to get out of the -1 to hit from Jormungandr to shoot at the Tyrant Guard, and that's pretty rough into that with the 1-up save in cover. Them sitting on the 5-up feel no pain because I went first and barely did anything. So yeah, I was just able to tank through all of that, have 1 Tyrant Guard remaining. I lost 2 Tyrant Guard models, and the Dorns were super far forward. 2 of the Lehman Russes were real far forward. I was able to just yeet my deadly army out, and between Psychic and the Flyrant and the Shard Gullet, pick up 2 Dorns and I think 2 Lehman Russes in the return turn, and that basically seals the game.
In turn 1?
Turn 2. The top of my turn 2.
I was like, holy!
Yeah.
I was like, oh my god!
So nothing happened in turn 1, Ward.
That's a lot of damage.
I didn't move out at all in turn 1. I moved like 2 things forward, got behind cover, repositioned for stuff, and then yeeted Feel No Pain onto the Tyrant Guard. So they were just far enough forward to get to where they needed to go on turn 2, because going turn 1 into guard is either I don't do anything or I just die. So I just chose not to do anything, and he moved super aggressive. And yeah, I killed 2 Dorns and 2 Russes in 1 turn. All of the damage was there. But here's the thing about Dorns. They're T9. They have a 2-up save. They don't have an invulnerable save. So Neg 4 puts you on saving on a 6. And you just dump a bucket of those on somebody with flat 3 damage, and that'll pick up a Dorn. So that match kind of went that way. Largely decided by turn 3 after I picked up all the big pieces. He dropped in a Kazarkin bomb and did some work with those. But it was able to pull that one out. Then round 3.
The showdown.
Me and Bryce.
Showdown. Do you want to talk about it here? And I'll probably just skip talking about it in my recap, because it'd basically be the same thing.
Yeah, we can just talk about it together here. But yeah, I went into that match, and it's funny because I believe that was it was day 2. I was worried about matching into Eli, but it was like either I was going to match into Eli or I was going to match into Bryce, and I'm like I'm not stoked about either one of those.
So from my perspective, the big deal from this matchup for the 2 of us was that it was on the Scouring, which gives me an easy secondary in banners, and it gives me a lot of room to drop the scary stuff at a good angle. And knowing your army, because we've played this matchup a good number of times, you struggle to screen out things. I think, and the Scouring exacerbated that problem for you.
Exactly that, yeah. No, and I think it was top of turn 2, right before I handed turn 2 over to you, I think it was, when I was like, well, I'm going to move everything forward, and you're going to drop down in one of these places over here, and either you kill enough stuff and you win the game, or you don't, and I probably win. And the first one happened. So
the first one did happen.
Bryce dropped down and picked up a tremendous amount of my army.
I think it was the pod itself, which was 10 Devastators, so two 5-mans with 3 grabs and a multi-melta in each. The first Devastator squad I activated with the multi-melta hitting on a 2, and I popped the Cherub, so 4 shots out of that multi-melta. That one guy on his own picked up one of the 2 Carnifexes on the point that you were trying to defend. And so then that left the rest of the grav cannons and a whole 4 other melta shots to try and take care of the other one. And at that point, it was just like, okay, so that went really well for me.
Yep. And then 3 turns, I think, of Chad Gullett just whiffing on the stupid repulsor thing. Like, any one of these
that
shots that just go through,
Yeah.
it hits you and does damage. Oh, I failed 2 wounds? That's pretty amazing.
Yep. Hey, it's got 16 of them. Yeah.
Yep.
No, there was some
just how it
unfortunate
is.
stuff for you there. Yeah.
And yeah, a couple other things, but yeah, I mean that's how our match goes. That's how the Iron Hands Big Bugs match plays out. Is if my saves go off, I live through enough and get into combat, and I probably pick up enough to, if not pull the game, make it real tight. If Bryce can kill enough stuff before I can do that, the game's just over.
I have a lot of good. I think also I have a lot of good profiles into your shooting. I've got a lot of high strength damage that's not in the greatest of quantity, but in your low model count, it just is kind of at full effectiveness.
It's less even the quantity and more that most other armies take some kind of degrading returns or something, right? Like you reroll ones. You boost this guy up to 2. You boost that guy up to 2. Everybody that's near this guy just rerolls everything or whatever, right? Like you've got a lot of instances of kind of like Ward does built in, where you counteract and put redundancies in place, right?
It is an insanely redundantly shoot. Like the redundancy in the shooting of that army is dumb.
Like so you're wounding me on 4s, but you're like, oh okay, well a +1 to wound, and I reroll 1s. So actually it's on 3s and rerolling 1s. And you're like, oh, great.
Well, no +1 to wound. I know for a fact I don't have that because I have bemoaned the loss, but I do have a lot of access to rerolls, which helps.
Right, and yeah, it just gets there, and like we'll get to in one of my later matches from day 2. When you're saving on 5s and 6s, like you can't really even bemoan the dice. Like the probability is that you fail. so that's just kind of what it is. Like when somebody shoots at me with mass fire that puts me on 5s and 6s, I'm like, well, I'm gonna take some damage here.
Yeah. No,
and you do that with every shooting phase. So that's just what it is. Like, yeah.
Yeah, there are some hot dice there, but I think it's in general. I just think it's kind of a rough matchup for the Monster Mash Nids.
It is, yeah, and particularly in the way that you've got Iron Hands built, and some of the other Iron Hands lists that we've been seeing like break the top of the meta or whatever. This fares a little bit better, and that they're more infantry shooting oriented, right? Like the 20 Desolator Marine list, like I laugh at a little bit.
Yeah,
like you got to pull them out, and they're going to kill one
ridiculous.
thing, and I'm going to kill them. Like whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the me and Bryce matchup. That was the hog on hog violence for the weekend. Bryce,
I ate pork that night.
Yeah, Bryce, got 97, 95, 97? I got a 45. Like, so he really stomped me good.
I actually don't remember, but that sounds about right.
Yeah, no, it was. And that's again, that's how that match goes, right? Like it's over on turn 3, and then it's mopping up points. So we go into day 2. I'm 2-1. Still feeling all right about everything. I spent the whole night looking at the matchups and thinking that like chances are good I'm playing into Eli and Yannari, which, most elf matchups at this point, I'm not super concerned about. Like Hail of Dooms can be real bad, but it's got to be piloted perfect. But the Yannari list and knowing Eli as a player, like that scares me a bit, because it just counteracts a lot of what I do. But I ended up not playing into that, and we played into Dark Elves, which, ironically enough, is a match that I'm very familiar with because of my consistent games with Bryce. And as they're with Bryce...
And I can tell you right now, the Dark Elf matchup into all of your -1 damage Carnifexes is significantly worse than the Iron Hands into that matchup.
Did you play Landed by chance?
No, I played Mike Delange. I don't know how to. I'm probably gonna mess the last name up. Mike from Flying Monkeys. Great dude, super fun opponent. Was a wonderful game, but it was exactly that, Bryce. It was. There's a lot of struggle into the high toughness -1 damage.
Into your list, and if I remember his list correctly, most Drukhari who are not running pain engines, which you haven't really seen since Thick City was a thing. The only consistent access that they have to something that is greater than damage 2 is in Drazar, because he can get his damage 3 attacks, and even then, that's going to damage 2. It's not guaranteed. For the most part, Drukhari are scary with a lot of damage to, like, strength 5, 6-ish melee, which is just going to struggle to get through Carnifexes.
Yeah, that's what happened. I mean, he had some Ravengers, which are like the shooty boats or whatever.
And they failed him?
Well, he was overly concerned with my behind enemy lines scoring, which, I mean, fair enough, should be. I have 3 Lictors and a deep striking Tyrannofax on the list. Like, I'm going to get them points.
I'm being facetious. I hate Ravagers with a passion. That's a topic for another time.
Fair enough. They didn't do what he needed them to do, right?
And that's exactly why I hate them.
So that match went well for me. I pulled it out. 5th round was into Black Legion, which is a match that I've played several times. I pair into it really well. My opponent was really solid in that they tactically knew what they wanted to do really well. I think that they miscalculated on the statistics and the probability of, like, chewing through a T8 or T7 body with chain swords.
Was that Randy?
Yeah.
Yeah, he is actually a very good player.
It seemed like he played very solidly. I think that he was caught off guard with what my list actually did. He got stuck in combat with his kill everything bike squad with a Carnifex and a Malceptor for like 2 or 3 turns, and finally was able to, like, separate that combat, and at that point he just had to use them to recoup some points in the back end. Which was what I needed to happen.
Yeah, because Chaos Space
Marines
probably struggled with the psychic output of everything that you had to, I'm sure.
Yeah, the psychic output is rough. He can make one unit really tanky, but I have so much killing power everywhere that, like, I just go kill the other things, you know? And even when you make the Terminator squad really beefy, neg 5 damage shots, neg 3 4 damage shots, neg 3 flat 3 melee attacks, or neg 4 flat 3 melee attacks, like, and there's a lot of them. Like, anybody that's played into the list can attest that if I get into you with 2 Screamer Killers in the Flyrant, which is what happened to that Terminator brick, does it really matter what defensive profiles you have on it?
I mean, it sort of does, but I get what you're saying. It's like, you know, you're going to fail some of these saves, and each one is just a dead Terminator, and you only have 10.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, there's 22 attacks coming in from the Screamer Killers. There's another 9 coming in from the Flyrant after he's just ate 3 other units, and now is fully Maw-Clawed of Thyrax out, or whatever. He's re-rolling his wounds. He's hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s. The Screamer Killers are hitting on 3s, re-rolling 1s. They're all wounding on 2 or 3. Yeah. Flyrant's re-rolling. One of the Screamers is re-rolling. Like, it doesn't. Yeah.
The biggest gate he can put. The biggest gate he could put on the Terminator brick is the Trans Hitman buff off of a Dark Apostle. But I don't remember. Was he running that?
He was. Yeah.
But even then, that's like
the Trans Hitman buff onto the bikes. So I engaged the Terminators.
Well, yeah, that would do it then.
Yeah, I mean, once that buff hit, that's what I'm saying. Like, once that buff hit the bikes and the Terminators became exposed, I just removed them. And from that point, it was just collecting my points and making sure he couldn't score enough on his turn 5, because he had bottom of turn 5. And that's just how it broke out. I mean,
those games
I won by 3 points.
Those games are always really satisfying, where you see how the game is going to progress, and this is a testament to your continued growth, Dawn. But how you see, and I'll mirror this with my game into Capco back at Melee at Shiloh, where I'm like, oh, I'm going to get tabled, but I think I'll still win by a couple points because I've managed to do X, Y, or Z. Right? So you managed to score just enough that it's like, cool. If you score everything you can, I think I still got it, right? And that's very difficult exactly to gauge.
You know, and I was more questioning my math, Ward, because, like, you know me, I
math is hard
a little bit through the day. So I'm just doing the math in my head, and I'm like, so I'm 18 points ahead. He can get max 8 here. He can get the 3 tertiary. He can get this. He can get that. I'm pretty sure the max he can score is 15 or 16. So, okay.
And then you ask yourself the question, do I just win?
Yeah, exactly that. It was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to move the Tyran effects here. That means you have to do X, Y, and Z to get the maximum amount of points, which I believe is 15, which means I win by 3. And then we stared at each other for a while, and then he did all those things and did the math, and he goes, you win by 3.
Oh, dude, it's so satisfying when you do that.
And I was like, oh, yay!
Way to go, Don. Way to put in a showing for a book, or for an army that, like, let's be real, has been largely discounted since they got their nerfs going into Arcs of Omen.
It was really interesting to go from being, like, showing up at the table and be like, oh, you're playing freaking Tyranids, to showing up at the table and people be like, oh, you're playing Tyranids?
Don, now you know how it feels. They're like,
yeah.
Gosh, you're playing Tyranids and they suck, and then you spike them.
Turns out a bunch of T8 15 wound bodies is still hard to deal with.
Mm-hmm. It does seem to go that way at times. But now, since we're done talking about the poor and downtrodden, let's go to the meta oppressors.
Yeah, Daddy Drop Pod.
Well, unfortunately, I feel like I let down the meta chasing aspect of Iron Hands these days, finishing 3-2. And I'm gonna go through I'll go through my day one pretty quick because it was actually rather. Me and Don's game was the most interesting one of my games from day one, and we already talked about it. So my round one. Like Ward mentioned, there were pairings went up, and then there were repairings. So initially, I was paired into Chaos Knights with 2 big knights and like 7 little ones. And I was repaired into a different player running Chaos Knights with 2 big knights and 7 little ones. So,
you lucky dog.
Look, I have been traumatized by Chaos Knights playing Drukhari, so there is something very, very satisfying to me about being able to walk up to a knight matchup with Iron Hands and just being like, yeah, this feels fine. And credit to my opponent, like, he played a very good game, but it's one of those matchups that just is not very good for Chaos Knights, right? Like, the Desolator Marines hop out and they shoot the big knight because it can't be obscured, and they just can reach it with their 48-inch range super crack missiles. You lose the big knight super fast. I don't have to expose any of my army. You're down a big knight. Say go and move out to get on points and start losing more things. Just a bad time all around. And then
that big knight is huge, right? Because it's like almost 400 points, and then it's 4 victory points.
Not gonna lie though, it was huge, but there were some tables at the event that probably could have hit it. Unfortunately for my opponent, we just weren't on one of those tables. And then my game 2 was against Dark Angels, running kind of a Ravenwing skew build. And again, credit my opponent, very nice guy. This was one where he just lost it by being inexperienced with player placed. Because I'll tell you, it was... what is the mission where you've got... it was Abandoned Sanctuaries. So you have your 1 home objective, and you've got 1, 2, 3 in the middle. So as we were rolling off, I got the first drop for terrain, and so since I'm playing a shooting army, naturally I took 1 crate and I put it right in the middle of the board. Thinking, of course, that my opponent would then put a ruin on one of these other ones. His first drop is to put his line of sight blocking his big ruin on his home objective. To which I just kind of paused for a second and slowly picked up my other crate and just put it down on another midfield objective. And then I look at him and it's for his next drop, and I'm thinking, okay, surely that third one is going to get blocked by something now. And he puts it in his deployment zone, to which I'm like, I guess I put a forest on this third objective? And so essentially that was kind of the game, right? You're playing into Iron Hands. There are 3 objectives in the middle of the board, completely exposed to guns. And I mean, it just kind of was that from there. He also came out on his turn 1. He got the first drop, and he came out to try and catch some shooting angles into me. I think he picked up pretty much most of my speeders, which I can learn from to reserve them, but like in return to losing my land speeders, I think he lost like more than half of his army to my shooting because I just came out because I could see everything, and it was a lesson on how you can lose the game in player placed, right? When you're not the shooting army, don't let your opponent put 3 things in the middle of the board that don't block line of sight. Yeah. And then my game 3, of course, was Dawn, which we talked about. Yep, I ate bug and I ate well. So was
it bug or was it pork?
Pork bug.
Pork bug. Okay.
Pork bug. I'm not consistent. You know me. So going into day 2, so full disclosure, so I went 0-2 on day 2. I had one really good game and another game that was a good learning experience for me because it was one of those games that I felt was very winnable if I had done a few different things. So my round 4 opponent was Brett Perk. I can't remember which, but as I come to later find out, he was a guy who, when he lived in the 48, like the continuous US, would regularly compete for top ITC. And he certainly played like it. He was a very good opponent. He was running a very different demons list from what we would normally expect, playing into Brent. So his list was Be'lakor, Scarbrand, a Bloodthirster who had the phase cap, and it could heal himself by killing models. And then after the big monsters, he had a unit of Pinks, unit of Bloodletters, unit of Plague Bears, 5 Blood Crushers, and then some skirmishing units of Flamers. So I went into this matchup, and I was quite scared of it, actually, because what I could see he was going to do is he was going to have Be'lakor and the Phase Cap Bloodthirster were going to start on the board. Because Be'lakor, for those who don't know, is a bitch to try and kill in shooting. He is just next to impossible to 1 round shoot to death. And then obviously the Phase Cap Bloodthirster is safe from 1 round of shooting because you put 8 wounds on it, and then that's all you can get. So the way that his list worked was the Bloodthirster runs at you. That's the distraction Carnifex to let Be'lakor move into the mid board, and then on his turn 2, Be'lakor will move and he will bring in Scarbrand as a Warp Locust, which means he will come in 6 inches away from you. So at that point, he's got Be'lakor trying to charge you, he's got Scarbrand charging you at a 6-inch rerollable, and he might also have a Bloodthirster in there. So this was a very scary matchup for me because I knew that if I made a misplay in my first or second movement phase, he was going to come in and, like, Scarbrand would touch me, he has a no fallback aura, and that's just game. So what I did into this, which ended up being the correct play, was I have a Repulsor, and normally that's in there as anti-desolation, or that's my anti-desolation marine tech, right? If my opponent has something that's gonna dive bomb on my indirect, I can put him in the tank. Usually the things that are good at killing Primaris infantry bodies are not that great at killing the tank, especially something that can get to me turn 1, so that usually keeps them safe. What I did this game, was I did put 5 Desolation Marines in the Repulsor, but I also put my 1 unit of Infiltrators in there, because I was looking at his list, and I was thinking, okay, if he goes first, the first thing he's going to want to do is he's going to sacrifice something to try and kill my Infiltrators, or at the very least, if he can't kill them, if he can whittle them down to like 2 or 3 models, suddenly the area of Deep Strike denial that they project is much smaller, and it's much easier for him to find a gap into. So I put him in the Repulsor, so that way he wasn't able to actually dive bomb them, and then in my turn 2 movement, I was able to get them out, and I advanced them out of the Repulsor, I made a giant conga line of them, right in the middle of the board, and I made sure everything in my army I cared about was behind the Infiltrators. And so that way, when he was able to bring in, he wasn't able to do his Demon Deep Strike thing. So I felt very proud of myself for that. Call out again to Peyton for giving me that idea. It worked really, really well. What ended up happening with that game, legitimately, I didn't pick the best secondaries, but I got very much held back by sticky objectives. And on both of my day 2 games, I basically tabled both of my opponents, but against Brett, he was able to have 2 objectives that were stickied, so even though I could catch an angle and shoot him off of them, he was able to score really well on primary still that I couldn't interact with because I lost my speeders and I lost my van vets to just, throughout the course of the game. So that was kind of unfortunate. I think the final score was him somewhere in the 90s. I think I scored like a 75. But overall, it was a very good game. Brett's a very good opponent, and I took a valuable lesson in learning how to play into that sort of monster mash with Space Marines.
Yeah, because that is like max aggression. Like when you talk about how do you deal with a face cap bloodthirster, and then Scarbrand, and then if Scarbrand makes combat, not being able to fall back. In addition to like Bellacore, although he doesn't have a ton of offensive output, he does have some. But as a utility piece, playing around the 3 of those together, and in addition to everything else, it's just a hard puzzle to solve.
Yeah.
I felt without that spirit, without that experience, like you kind of have to guess and learn on the fly.
In retrospect, because we talked about the game afterwards, what he suggested to me is on a mission where there is sticky objectives to combat squad my unit of Vanguard veterans and put 1 squad in reserve into like true deep strike. So that way you've got a unit that can kind of go and respond to try and jump on an objective if it gets cleared in shooting, which I thought was a great idea. And I'll probably, if I end up playing a similar list or just, we're playing a sticky objective mission this weekend, I will probably do, because that makes a lot of sense, right? You need to just drop on a point and I'm usually not going to try and hit that charge. If I got nothing to lose, I might as well. But that was a much better thought process of what to use that unit for than trying to use them as a responsive melee threat, which is what I normally use them for. And then my round 5. This one has lingered in the back of my brain since it, just because this was my game to lose, and I felt like I did a lot of things that lost it for me. So first of all, I'm playing, so it's Dark Angels. Props to this gentleman. It's Dark Angels running the Lion, which in 9th edition, I love you for. That is such a great thing to actually see. But it was the Lion, a whole slew of characters. You had a chaplain, you had an apothecary on bike, you had a Blade Guard Ancient banner, 2 5-mans of Blade Guard vets. And then after that, it was 2 units of Infiltrators and 3 5-mans of Desolation Marines. So this game, it ended up coming down to it was a 3-point game. I lost by 3. And I took as secondaries, so my secondary choices, 2 were okay, 1 was bad. I took Behind Enemy Lines, I took Assassinate, and I took Grind Them Down. So my thought process in this was Oath of Moment is a very good secondary in the Marine matchup if you go second. So I didn't want to take Oaths because I didn't want to gamble on having to go second. My opponent did take Oaths of Moment, and he did end up going second, so the gamble paid off for him. But I didn't feel confident making that gameplay decision based on a dice roll, like a 50-50. The other aspect was I took Grind Them Down, the thought process being I can use a drop pod to eliminate his Desolation Marines, and at that point, he has to kill me in melee. So I was kind of thinking I could kite him a little bit and be able to kill more units than he was able to pick up of mine in return. And then Assassinate was essentially looking at his list. I was going for the table, right? I saw his list. It was Marines in general, feel very weak to Iron Hands shooting. So I just was like, I'm going to go for the kill. So what ended up happening was he got first drop of terrain, and he took a very big piece of terrain that did not have windows, and he stuck it right in the middle of the board. And this thing was like a foot square. This thing was massive. And I could not see anywhere through it. And by turn 2, he just kind of threw his whole army in there. And he could sit in this ruin that I couldn't see into. And he just score his oath, bottom of turn, and just there was nothing I could do about that.
You had the only board in the whole top 10 or 20 tables that had a square like that you could throw in the center of it. Like, I seen that board after your game, and I was like, man, I would have killed for this.
Yeah, it was pretty huge, and I think my opponent won 2 very important rolls. He got to drop the first piece of terrain, and he got to go second, which is both huge. The first one is huge into my army, and the second one is huge into the mirror matchup. And then what ended up happening, so on my first turn, I dropped my drop pod, I got a good angle, I picked up 14 out of 15 of his Desolation Marines. What I did not account for was the Blade Guard Ancient giving them Fire on Death. So of those 14 Desolation Marines I killed, he got to shoot with about 10 of them. What this translated to is instead of getting an initial 3 points of behind enemy lines, because I was able to squeeze one Devastator fully into his deployment zone, I scored 0 going into that turn because he managed to pick up all of one squad. That normally would have been fine, but at that point I just was struggling. I struggled with that ruin. Like, to tell you how big this thing is, my repulsor started the game on the board. It did not shoot once the entire game because it could never see anything. That's how big this thing was, and he just crammed everybody in there. And because I couldn't see anything and because I couldn't kill anything, I started scoring 0s on grind them down. To counteract this, I started going for. I stopped trying to contest the middle because this was on the mobile objectives mission. And so what that meant is if I could hold my home objective and I could hold my priority, I knew I could score 44 on primary. So I didn't feel the need to actually go and contest his priority or the middle, because if I did, it would possibly lower it would probably lower my primary score. It wouldn't stop his ability to score primary, but it would give him the ability to go score shock tactics. So in the end, we ended up having I think he scored a 4 on shock tactics and I scored a 6 on grind. So we kind of negated each other's secondary score. But ultimately, there were a lot of moments where it's in a 3-point loss, that's 1 turn of behind enemy lines that I didn't get. That's 1 character that I wasn't quite able to get to. There were a lot of failure points, but I felt very frustrated myself that I just felt like some of the choices I made did not contribute to. I didn't play a very clean game in that one. But but overall, I learned a lot from that game. I learned a lot about how to do player place terrain on the mobile objective mission, especially where you want to place a crate, where you want to drop a piece of terrain in order to move something over to it. But yeah, I think I ended 3-2, which I was slightly disappointed in, but it's still a winning record. And Ward, you were initially talking about how you got 3rd place, which knocked you out for best overall. But I also want to let you know that because you got that award, you actually made me eligible for best in faction Space Marines, because I still ended up being the top placing player who just was using Marine Codex. So thank you for that.
Suffering from success.
I'm failing upwards.
Yeah, this is going to be the end of part 1. We're going to take a little break here, and I believe that we are altering the format this time so that we're going to be breaking up part 2 into a second video to make it a little bit more bite-sized for people, because we don't want it to be a full 2 hours again. Apologies to Don for doing that to him last time. So please hang with us, check the next video as it comes out, and stay tuned for more content from the Hogs of War.